been a very good year for me, or in fact the last 12 months have been pretty tough. Well, I got a call from George Smith halfway through the practice session yesterday afternoon here at Lakeside, and he said, well, Gary's put the car in. And he was doing about 140 mile an hour when it went in. So I haven't been able to get down there to look at it, but I don't think it's a touch-up paint job. So after the practice session was over, he rang back and said, well, we're running one car this weekend, Pete. He said the car's absolutely demolished, that's it. Gary got on the phone and said, well, he said, to be absolutely honest with you, he said, I just put it off the road. I've got no excuses. It was just a driving error, and I really commend him for the honesty of that.
My immediate reaction was to try and sort the car out. In that situation, you're concentrating on trying to retrieve the car. Nothing was going through my mind for fear of my own safety. In fact, I was very unlucky at the end of the crash. I had almost got away with it. We'd fought the car for about 600 yards, and when I finally hit the fence and finally stopped, my initial reaction is, what am I going to tell Brock? Motor racing does have its associated dangers, and everyone is aware of that. I would say myself, I'm more aware than anyone else here, because obviously our family paid the ultimate price with my father, but it doesn't stop me from racing. I just am very aware of the situation, and you know, it's one of those things. You don't think about it. You weigh up the situation as it comes along.
Mate, literally, that's what you call getting caught with your pants down, I suppose, because we had a couple of little problems in the first session. I had an alternator cease operating, which these things don't take kindly to in the management system. And Greg had a bit of an oil leak, and it sort of just all fell apart in the first session. So we come out in the second one, and guess what? It rained. So, story of, I suppose, just mismanagement.
On Friday, when you turned up, the car was noticeably quicker than anyone else here. And of course, overnight, all the experts got out. Dick Johnson was cheating. He'd found 3 seconds in a couple of weeks.
Well, the only answer to that, I suppose, is the fact that the same guy that is preparing our motor cars now worked for Peter Brock last year. So I say anyone can make their own opinion of that. Eh?
In 1965, when I was born, I was in a bassinet when my father won the James Hardy, which it wasn't the James Hardy in them days, it was Armstrong 500. And it's great here. It's great to be here today, trying my hardest and knocking off the Peter Brocks and the Dick Johnsons, which no respect to them, they are fantastic drivers, but there is no young blood coming up, that's all.
Well, you're certainly talented young blood that's come up. Not only winning races last year, but pole position. That usually takes an old hand to knock a few of these big blokes off at pole.
Yeah, that's right. They've had a lot of experience with qualifying, and that which is probably most of the experience you've got to have is in qualifying, because a lot of the young people sort of tend to try too hard in the qualifying and mess up a lot of the qualifying laps.
And what a strong looking field we have here today. 20 starters, 55 laps of competition for the third round. And of course, a winner piece to George Fury and Glenn Seaton. Cars on their wind down lap. They've been warming the tyres up for the last 2 circuits. Might be timely now to check the starting lineup for round 3 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship. Pole position has gone to young Glenn Seaton, Nissan Skyline. Out of 2 is car number 6, Peter Brock in the Commodore. From 3 is car 3, Jimmy Richards in the BMW. From 4 is car 4, Tony Longhurst in the second of the Bimmers. 5, car number 2, Alan Grice in the Commodore. From 6, number 11, Larry Perkins in the NZ Connectors Commodore. From 7:30, Georgie Fury in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. From 8:17, Dickie Johnson in the Shell Ultra High Sierra. From 9:18, Greg Hansford, his teammate in the second Sierra. From 10:75, Colin Bond in the Alpha. From 11, Denny Holm, welcome back Denny in the Ford Sierra. And out of 12:35, Andrew Madecki in the Oxo Super Cube Ford Sierra. And of course, Glenn Seaton with pole position, car number 15, 21 years of age. Everything going for him here today at the Lakeside International Raceway. Ready for the start. Round 3 of the Shell Ultra Nationals. They're racing! And getting away smartly as they went off was, in fact, Glenn Seaton. Going with him is Peter Brock, and then, of course, the 2 JPS BMWs. Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst. Johnson got away to a good start as well. So too did Denny Holm as they tracked down to the right-hander of the carousel. And it's the 21-year-old who leads Brock. Then the two JPS BMWs doing it nicely. Larry Perkins up on the inside, and Dickie Johnson in there with Alan Grice and George Fury to keep them company. An absolute sellout crowd at Lakeside Raceway as they come down towards the Dunlop Bridge. Seaton, Brock now moving to the outside for the challenge as they come down to Hungry Corner for the first time as the rest of the field goes by.
What a huge start from Glenn Seaton in car number 15. Peter Brock tucked in behind in the number 6 car, the older of his two mobile dealer team Commodores. Jim Richards flying in behind him in third place. Then Longhurst. Perkins has come up very quickly, and so too has Dickie Johnson. It looked as though Alan Grice made a fairly ordinary start. They come down along the Shell starting straight. End of lap number 1, 59 to go.
Across the strike, and Glenn Seaton leads it from Brocky. Then coming up smartly, the first of the JPS BMWs. Alan Grice starting this race with very, very hard compound tyres to go the distance. Dickie Johnson looking good, giving some concern here to Larry Perkins as they come out of the carousel. But they're light astir as they make their way down through Shell Ultra High Sweeper towards the Dunlop Bridge. Brock covering his tracks well, keeping the BMWs at bay. And in the meantime, Glenn Seaton leads the high-speed Race Parade down into Hungry Corner.
Jim Richards just lurking underneath the back of the 1,325 kilogram Holden Commodore. Of course, the BMW much, much lighter, something in the order of about 350 or 400 kilograms. And these are the cars that were tipped as being a real worry up here this weekend. They're light, they're quick, they're nimble, they're strong under brakes, and they don't knock their tyres around. And this race will run for almost 1 hour.
Coming down for the completion of 2, Peter Brock sits in the draft. Here's Dickie Johnson out wide, making a big run down there on the outside of Larry Perkins. Side by side, he takes Perkins. So Dick Johnson comes up through the pack, runs up in 5th spot. Perkins drops back to 6th, right on the clutches of Denny Holm.
The performance of the Sierra absolutely extraordinary then as it came down the straight. Johnson has made a number of modifications, some of which the Confederation don't agree with, to the turbocharger on this car. That'll be fought out later. But Johnson flying at the moment in the Ford Sierra Turbo.
So Tricky Dicky beneath the Dunlop Bridge sits in touch with the race leaders. At the head of the pack, 21-year-old Glenn Seaton in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. Clear of Brocky in the number 6 Mobile Commodore. Then the 2 JPS BMWs, Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst. Then comes Johnson. Over the top of Motorcraft Hill. A little sideways that time was Johnson, but Seaton just setting the right sort of pace. He has them all in for the draft though as they come back across the line again. Brock moves to the outside to cover and hedge his bets. And there's Johnson, number 17, the Shell Ultra High, Cosworth Ford Sierra. Past the Bob Jane T-Mart's helicopter there on the infield and out of the carousel. Brock staying in touch with Glenn Seaton.
Johnson is making ground on the back of the 2 BMWs. And then behind them, there's another freight train of about 4 or 5 cars. And tapping them is Colin Bond with some newfound performance from the Alpha 75. An intriguing battle on our hands as Peter Brock tries to make a manoeuvre on Glenn Seaton, who hasn't made any mistakes all weekend.
Tony Longhurst moves to the outside of Jimmy Richards. He's getting a little agitated. Wants to know if the team leader can get on and deal with Brock, because he's being harassed here from Dick Johnson, and Johnson is absolutely flying in the Shell Ultra High Cosworth Sierra. Once again, they make the run down the start-finishing straight. Glenn Seaton, Peter Jackson, Nissan Skyline. Here comes Johnson! Out of the draft, 2 BMWs, takes one of them. That's Tony Longhurst, but Longhurst will have the inside run for the next corner. You reckon Tricky Dicky isn't a little competitive here today?
And you don't think Tony will go down without fighting? That's for sure. So it's Richards in 3rd position, Longhurst in 4th, Dick Johnson is 5th, Larry Perkins is 6th, and then Alan Grice in behind him. Well, what a sensational start to round 3 of the Shell Series here today. And have a look at Longhurst. How hard is he pushing the BMW through that right-hander underneath the bridge, Peter McKay?
There's a little bit of aggro between these two guys. So
A little bit.
Well, we'll see what speed the Sierra's got next time they run the start-finishing shoot here at Lakeside International Raceway. Brock closing up just a bit on Glenn Seaton. This is where the scrap is as Johnson makes his bid to come through the pack. Number 17.
Johnson spent the last 3 weeks working with the Zytec EPROM system, the engine management. Now that white flag signifies there's a service vehicle on the road. We saw it in the foreground. They're obviously going out to retrieve somebody or something in trouble.
Well, there it is going down on the inside. The pace
Double yellow flags in the corner. Somebody's come off at the carousel by the look of it. And obviously there's a car parked down underneath the O in the Volvo sign. I wonder what's going on. It's George Fury's car.
I think it is.
It's George Fury's car number 30. Now I wonder who has caused that or what has happened.
Well, our cameras haven't picked that one up. We've been staying with the Dyson. Fury was sitting back in about the 10th spot. We'll bring you all the details. Glenn Seaton, meantime, leads the race. Brock in second. Jimmy Richards third. Tony Longhurst fourth. And hard-charging Dick Johnson is fifth.
Well, poor old George had problems all through the lead-up into this race. They have been here since Tuesday. That's the Nissan team. He wasn't getting his car up to full boost, and George was laying in 8th position in the opening few laps of this race. And he is the championship leader after 2 rounds.
Here comes Dick Johnson again. Beverly Brock keeping an eye on the times that Peter's recording. Double yellow flags down at the end of the circuit, where we see a break in the tyre wall down there, and that's where George Fury has gone off. The drivers no passing through that turn.
Some interesting things starting to happen here now. You'll notice that Johnson is quite obviously hard underneath the back of Longhurst. Perkins is getting a bit closer to Johnson, and Alan Grice indeed is following all that, so we're going to get a concertina effect here ultimately as they all start to form up behind Peter Brock, not detracting from the man, but the car is just fractionally slower at the moment than the lighter cars, and that'll mean that if anything, young Glenn's going to be able to get away.
This is exactly the scenario Glenn wanted. He wanted to make the jump at the start, have Brock in second, because he knew that the tyres on Brock's car, a bigger car, would fall away, and perhaps he would just manage to keep these other guys at bay. The threat in this race to Seaton, obviously, are the 2 black cars. Jim Richards was saying yesterday he felt they had the capacity to run the whole 60 laps and keep their lap times up.
That's Denny Holm, car number 10. Ford Sierra, Donna Cosworth. This is the 2.3 litre engine, only the single cam 2-valve model. And the 1967 World Formula 1 champion out with problems. Neville Crichton is due to drive that car. He's in the United States this weekend. And this is the battle. Tony Longhurst versus Dick Johnson, who is Queensland's leading touring car driver.
Loves to shine on his home track.
And loves Lakeside in particular.
I was posing the question, who is?
Car number 3, the JPS BMW all over Peter Brock. Here comes Johnson down the inside this time of Tony Longhurst. He won't back out of it. And Dick Johnson takes Longhurst. That moves him 1 more spot up. There's only Jimmy Richards ahead of him. Then he's after Brock and the race leader, Glenn Seaton.
That was a chain reaction set off by Peter Brock. You probably heard me draw breath as they went across the top of the Motorcraft hill. Brock got awfully sideways. And I think the 2BM started to make moves towards getting out of danger. That was all Dick Johnson needed. His cue was taken and away he went. Through on one of the BMWs. Now he's breathing on Jim Richards. Larry Perkins behind this bunch. Alan Grice behind him in turn. The VL Commodores had a few problems this weekend, and Alan is running 17-inch cross-ply Yokohama tyres. He's not quite happy with the compound that he's running at the moment. It's a bit harder than he'd like, so it'll take him a while to come through the field. And look at this.
Dick's going to win this argument. Wait for this. Brock will cart Richards to the outside, and Johnson will try and come down the inside. Shades of the replay of last year. Here comes Johnson down on the inside. See ya, Jim. Johnson makes the track. Now moves up into third. The race leader, Glenn Seaton. Peter Brock in second. Dick Johnson third, and going after them.
And the Queenslanders in front of us have gone absolutely berserk at this. And what great driving from all 4 not to exchange paint.
I'm quite sure the reaction here has been better than if Wally Lewis had walked across the lake. They come out of the carousel. There's Brocky trying to hold it down. Johnson sits in the draft. And we're following this tremendous dice as Johnson comes back through the pack in the Shell Ultra High Ford Cosworth with Sierra.
Notice the bodywork rubbing on the tyre that time as the car really started to roll steer through that corner.
They come up to the top of Motorcraft Hill. Tremendous race going on here for round 3 of the Shell Australian Touring Car Championship. It was George Fury that went off early in the day. He's back in the pits. He's quite okay. We'll talk to him a little later. Once again, they come onto the start-finishing straight. Glenn Seaton, lap number 10, working it strongly. Johnson coming down the outside of Brock. How wide has he got to go on the grass? It passes him. Johnson now up to second and stalks the race leader, Glenn Seaton. What a drive.
Well, that's just out and out horsepower. The car seems to be cornering only as quickly as the other cars, but it is squirting in a straight line.
It's certainly picked up a whole host of horsepower since the Simmons Plains round.
Oh, look at the tyre starting to rub on that guard again. Real smoke coming from the back of the car as he lurched around the outside of the Golson BMW 635. This is going to give the scrutineer something to think about.
Dick Johnson coming up to the top of Motorcraft Hill. Georgie Fury is back in the pits, and with him is our Colin Young.
An explosion inside the car. What happened, George?
Well, I was just braking for the bottom corner of the carousel there, and the whole car just seemed to explode inside, and it started burning, and all the bits and pieces inside the car started to burn, and the outside of the car was burning as well. I put that out and started it up again, and came back there, but I think I missed my motor race.
You're not hurt in any way?
No, just a bit stunned. It was, you know, one of those petrol-type explosions.
Well, George Fury out of the race with an explosion inside the car and a new hat coming up.
What a race we've got going here as Jimmy Richards puts the pressure on Peter Brock, pushes him wide, and Longhurst comes through, almost clips the front of Brock's car. There's a 1-2 through on the inside. They're doing plenty of racing. Tremendous stuff. We're getting some fantastic racing out of this round, because while all that was happening, Larry Perkins comes up and passes Brock. And keep in mind that Grice is running very, very hard compound tyres. Don't be surprised if he comes into it just a little later. He's sitting in behind Brock at this stage. They work the start-finishing straight yet again with Seaton, the race leader, Dickie Johnson running in second. And there's the gap, the race leader, and it's shrinking all the time.
That was a great piece of driving by Larry Perkins in the NZ Connectors Commodore there as well, because he used his opportunities very, very well and snuck through on Brock. And Brock, if anything, is now falling into the clutches of Alan Grice. It really is hard to keep an eye on 7 or 8 of Australia's top drivers battling in this one.
Look, the most fantastic thing being the amount of passing we've seen and how close they've been running. There's been no biffing and banging. They're just doing it as hard as they can. Just look at the way the car's working beneath the Dunlop Bridge. There's Perkins in the NZ Fluid Connectors Commodore. Brock sits behind him, and Grice now moving up right behind Peter Brock. As they go to the top of Motorcraft Hill, work their way out of Shell Ultra High Turn, and down the roller coaster they come. Coming through the turn and working the front straightaway. Here's Dick Johnson sitting in behind. And in race cam, of course, Alan Grice is now tagging Peter Brock, making it up through the pack, coming down to the right-hander at the carousel. There's Grice, Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. A new VL model Commodore, having its first outing here today at Lakeside International Raceway. They crest the top of the hill and work their way down to the Dunlop Bridge. Greg Hansford, meantime, sits on the tail of Alan Grice, so we have a real race going from 1st to 10th spot. Coming up the top of the hill. We'll see how close Grice can get this lap around. It's a little loose in the tail, Grice's car. He's got Greg Hansford just pushing away at the inside of him. Through the right-hand king. There is the face dice as Dick Johnson comes up on the tail of Glenn Seaton and putting plenty of pressure on Seaton. Johnson, the dark horse in this field. Top driver here in unofficial practice on Friday, beaten by the weather yesterday. Seaton finds another turbocharged car in his mirrors, and it's not a Nissan Skyline, it's Ford's new Cosworth Sierra.
Well, how much faster is Dick Johnson than everybody at the moment? This is an extraordinary performance from the Queenslander in car 17. He is charging through the field. Can it last?
They're working their way to the top of Motorcraft Hill. Look for the pull-out next time as they come down the start-finishing straight. Over the top, down the roller coaster. Here comes Johnson, sits in behind. We'll get the draft pull through this turn. See if he's got horsepower to burn as they come out. I think Seaton has really got the pedal to the metal, so to speak. Lap 15 as they work the front straight. And Dick Johnson, the crowd goes wild with excitement. He pulls up on the outside and takes Seaton. Dick Johnson from behind now leads. There is the view, our secondary race cam in Seaton's car as he trails the race leader, Dick Johnson of Queensland, into the carousel. Fantastic stuff. Johnson, number 17, comes out of the bend. The place here at Lakeside has erupted You can actually hear the people above the noise of the motors. Queensland's favourite son. It's been a long time since Dickie Johnson led a round of the Australian Touring Car Championship.
I just wonder, Mike, whether Dick has in fact bolted on some soft tyres for this race, and that would explain his speed.
Good well. Down the roller coaster. Listen to the crowd. Queensland's own is out in front and running away. Is what still the same. Dick Johnson of Queensland, car number 17. Opening the gap over Glenn Seaton in car number 15, the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. Then, of course, the two JPS BMW M3s running side by side. And Larry Perkins, one spot back behind them, Brock, and, of course, Alan Grice. We detailed earlier a purge, I guess you could call it, yesterday. A lot of people very interested in the turbocharger and aspects of the turbocharger on Dick Johnson's car. Scrutineers moved in yesterday and sealed some components. That is the subject of an eligibility question. However, Johnson says no problems. We've dealt with the issue a couple of times today. Johnson believes all is fair and square. And at the moment, though, I tell you what, the Ford Cosworth Sierra looking for its first world win.
Dick Johnson, Ford Sierra Cosworth. Let's take a look at some of the details of the man that's leading this race with the compliments of Nissan, 41 years of age, 3 times Australian Touring Car Championship, and he's finally on the boil for this year. He's the ruler of touring car racing here in Queensland, and so far in this title fight he's back in 11th place, but today is going to make all the difference. Those details with the compliments of Nissan.
One man who should be happy with the way the car is running is the team manager, engineer for Dick Johnson's team, formerly of the Peter Brock Holden dealer team, Neil Lowe, and of course Colin Young has him in the pits.
Neil, a few smiles in the Dick Johnson camp today.
Yeah, it's just a few. It's different from last meeting, isn't it?
What's the situation with the turbocharger? A lot of discussion that maybe Dick's car is not completely legal.
At the moment, there's only a lot of discussion, and all the discussions come from the other teams. They just don't like to see the potential of the Cosworth start to come out. These are an exceptionally powerful motor car. We ran the car for the last 2 meetings in a standard form. exactly as we bought the engine from England. And in the last 2 weeks, we've put in a bit of time and effort and development, and this is the result of it.
Well, it certainly is a great result for Queensland. Dick Johnson leading the third round of the Shell Australian Championship. Mike?
Thank you, Colin. Neil Lowe, once again, reaffirming no problems there. They ran the car almost stock standard trim off the UK engine builder, and they have been doing a lot of track testing here. I think the thing that was forgotten, that Johnson started the touring car title at Calder, had really no time for development between round 1 and round 2 because all the cars arrived in Tasmania due to a shipping dispute, basically the day of qualifying. And he's had 2 weeks or 3 weeks to play with the car up here, and he's been doing a lot of testing at Surface Paradise, and had a week on Friday and said, you watch it go this weekend.
Look at the background here, the two BMWs still nose to tail, and they're starting to close in on Glenn Seaton. And this will be very interesting. I wonder whether or not Glenn's tyres are starting to feel just a little worse for wear, Peter.
Well, that could be the case, Neil, but Glen's Skyline is at its worst through that fast kink. You'll notice that the Skyline of all the front-running cars has no aerodynamic panels on it. Alf Grant there in the pit. And through the kink, the Skyline tends to get quite unsettled, whereas the BMWs with their rear deck lid spoiler and their front air dam, and it's getting time here.
Yes, they are really closing up on Glenn Seaton now. Jimmy Richards doing all of the pursuing. Tony Longhurst sitting in there. They've had a good thing going. As soon as Jim makes an inside break on someone, Tony just forms up on the bumper and they take 2 at a time.
Double trouble.
Double trouble is right. So working down the front straight now, Glenn Seaton. He's quick through this part of the racetrack, and he's been dropping a wheel over onto the grass there all weekend.
And he's 3.8 seconds behind leader Dick Johnson. No need to give you any gaps between the next 3 drivers, that's for sure. Seaton and the 2 BMWs in hot pursuit, Richards and Longhurst.
Through the Shell sweeper there beneath the Dunlop Bridge and on the way to Motorcraft Hill, Seaton got away the last lap over Richards and Longhurst. Once again, up to the top of the hill. From about this spot on is about the only time that Jim gets onto the bumper of the Nissan Skyline. As soon as they hit the straight, that turbo power comes into play, and Jim doesn't move up again until just over 3/4 of a lap.
Notice Denny Holmes back out on the circuit once more, the Ford Sierra. Larry Perkins almost a straight length behind these drivers. Peter Brock behind him, and Alan Grice still sitting in behind Brock. The other thing is that I think Greg Hansford is gradually starting to close the gap just a little on those drivers. Case now of Glenn having to think very carefully about some defensive driving, but he hasn't thought quickly enough. Jim Richards goes through on the inside.
Good move.
Very cleanly done, and Tony Longhurst is going to have 20 cents worth of this as well.
Well, that hasn't worked. The old 1-2 double trouble that Peter mentioned didn't work that time. And we'll see whether or not Tony can effect a similar pass.
That entry into Hungry Corner is a Jim Richards specialty. I can recall 2 years ago he nailed Dick Johnson entering there.
Here they come. Richards running in second, third spot. Of course, is Glenn Seaton. They've covered 25 laps of round 3 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship so far. The next class we expect, or we're anticipating, will be Seaton and Longhurst. Jim's got a good break, actually. He's going for it. Coming down to Hungry Corner. You can see the gap that Richards has been able to pull out on Glenn Seaton. Meanwhile, Tony Longhurst comes up right on the tail of the Nissan Skyline, and as they come down the roller coaster off Motorcraft Hill, they're going to come up on quite a deal of traffic.
Tony doing a good job. Andrew Badicki in the pits in the Oxo Ford Sierra with problems under the bonnet, as you can see. They haven't been too happy with the car's handling this weekend, but they've had no worries at all in the power plant side of things. They've ejected Andrew Badiki. Longhurst getting closer and closer to the back of Seaton.
Is he what? Tony maybe setting up, if he can get just close enough to make an inside run on Seaton as they go down into the left-hander at Hungary Corner. He's not close enough at this moment. This is where Richards was able to nobble Seaton 3 laps ago. But he stayed in touch with the 21-year-old for the last lap of Lakeside.
You can see just how effective the BMW is at being able to nibble away at the back of a bigger car. Tony has the ability even mid-quarter to change his mind and say, OK, I'll try an inside run here. No, I might run for the outside. Fred Gibson is no doubt a worried man. And that's the advantage of having a 960-kilogram car. With horsepower.
And the scraps between two of the young lions of touring car racing, 29-year-old Longhurst, 21-year-old Seaton.
Tony just getting a little oversteer as he came out of the corner. They're running a D3 Pirelli radial tyre this weekend. The Nissan is on a Dunlop D06, reasonably hard radial tyre. So certainly nobody's running big softies out there at the moment as far as these two cars are concerned. And look at Longhurst trying to squeeze through on the inside, just gives Seaton a nudge. Alf Grant was the culprit behind all of that, in fact, because Glenn's got nowhere to go.
Yes, he has. Wait for it.
Well, look at Tony.
Tony's thinking about a big run down the outside, but
now Seaton gets a run through on the inside. Well, he was very lucky to get away with that because initially Alf couldn't do much about it. It was just in the way. That allowed enough room for Tony to get up and nudge Glenn. The cards fell the right way for Seaton that time.
Seaton again puts a wheel out onto the grass as they go through the left-hand kick. Down to the carousel. Number 17, but the man who has been stalking him for the past 6 or 8 laps, Jimmy Richards, is starting to gain a little on Queensland's number 1.
At the rate of around about 0.4 of a second per lap. The gap is now 3.01 seconds. You'll see here, there's second place Jim Richards. The gap back to Glenn Seaton in the background, 2.2 seconds. Tony Longhurst hard in behind him, and a further 8 seconds back to Larry Perkins.
All the ingredients for a sizzler of a finish.
Well, you consider there's another 30 laps to come, and weigh into account things like tyres and how tired they'll be, brakes, how hot they'll be, and how the driver's going to fare after a good hour's sprint racing.
A man who probably felt quite confident about the success of number 15, Glenn Seaton is the Peter Jackson Nissan team manager, Fred Gibson, and Colin Young is with him.
Fred, up until today, you had the fastest turbos in Australian touring car racing.
Well, I think we've still got a fairly quick car, Colin. It's not as fast as Diggy's. It looks like the day's got the wood on us. But let's see what happens at the end of the day and what at the end of the weekend, really. No, Diggy's car is very quick in a straight line. It's come out in the blue and been very quick. We're interested to look at the car to finish the race.
You've been talking to Glenn. How's he going?
Glenn's going fine. He's driving very hard and very quick in the car. It's a matter of how fast the BMWs are going to push it along. I don't think we're going to catch Diggy. He seems to be sort of pulling away in the race, but I think we can keep the BMWs on us for the whole race.
There's a lot of turbo talk in the pits. What's your opinion?
I'm not saying. I'll wait till I hear the official results at the end of the day.
Okay, Fred Gibson still in a confident frame of mind about Glenn Seaton's chances. Mike.
Thank you, Colin. He might well be, but Tony Longhurst is ready to take a little of that confidence and dent it at the moment, because Longhurst is working very hard indeed on the tail of the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. And while that was happening, we saw Alan Grice come out of the pits. As I mentioned before, he started the race with hard compound tyres and has had problems, had a half lose, went into the pits, and we spotted him coming out. In the meantime, though, Longhurst closing up on car number 15, Glenn Seaton. There's Dicky disappearing down the front straight. There's the man going after him, Jimmy Richards, in that magnificent little BMW M3 for the JPS team. What a fantastic little touring car the M3 is, despite all the problems of the opening round of the Bernie Eccleston's World Touring Car fracas in Italy. But full marks to Frank Gardner. He's put together two absolute screamers, perfectly legal cars for 1987.
285 horsepower is the figure the BMWs are producing right now, with more to come soon. So that's the bad news for the rival teams.
Car number 3, Jimmy Richards, running in second. Coming off the Motorcraft Hill.
No problems at all for the JPS team this weekend. Went down and spoke with them this morning. Everything went fine in the lead-up. Very happy with their cars. They hardly did any laps of practice at all, and they were one of the later arrivals at the circuit during the week.
And look at this, problems for Dickie Johnson. Johnson goes into the turn, and Jimmy Richards straight around the outside. Johnson slowed appreciably down on the inside line as they were approaching the turn, and has eased off completely. So maybe Dick Johnson's race has been run. Yes, Johnson's race has been run. Jimmy Richards, car number 3 for the JPS BMW team, takes over the lead in round 3 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship. Johnson limping back towards the pit area. That should now move Glenn Seaton up into second and Tony Longhurst third.
Certainly a big burst of pace from Dick. A shame for everybody here in Queensland, probably the biggest crowd that I've ever seen at the circuit. But he has now proven that there is performance in this car, and the development's there. You've only got to keep working with it, and that's something that'll keep him smiling for a while, and indeed his sponsors. Look at this battle for second place now. Glenn Seaton currently second, Tony Longhurst is third, and Tony is working very, very hard. Glenn wisely covers his tracks a little as they go through the right hand of the Volvo carousel.
Longhurst getting closer all the time.
This time last year, Tony was driving the 325, now running the 6-cylinder version, and bowled a bit of a wide at the top of the track down there. And there's Dick getting out of his car, and he ripped the sump off the BMW, which probably turned everybody's cars inside out. Let's hope that things work out a little bit better for him this time. Dick talking with brother Dave. Dino Johnson, one of the men responsible for putting together this big effort by the Johnson team.
We'll be having a talk with Dick in just a second, but in the meantime, Richards leads, Glenn Seaton in second, and back behind them, of course, Tony Longhurst and Alan Grice, who, of course, is down a lap because of the pit stop. I'd say he's gone in and come out maybe with some softer rubber on, because he's been able to hang in behind them for the last half lap. There's Grice, pictures from race cam. He's just going to make life that much more uncomfortable for Tony Longhurst.
Well, knowing how much these two love one another, this should be entertaining. These two had a fracas on, I think, 1984 in a battle over the Alpha Series. But we'll come back and have a look at this battle later on. Something a little more interesting at this stage is just what did happen to Dick Johnson. Cole Young has the answer.
Dick out of the race, what's the problem?
Well, actually, Cole, I thought we'd make a bit of a race of it this weekend, being our own track and all. So we turned the WEC up. It was giving us 1.8 bar a boost, which is great stuff, mate, because you can blow away in a straight line, which is the way the Commodores have been doing it all the time. So I thought, well, the old Henry can go past him any day. And unfortunately, the teeny little turbo that they got just couldn't hack the pace. But we know how to fix the problem, and we'll fix it before next race.
Been a lot about talk about your turbo today. Is it legal?
Mate, I reckon around about midnight tonight might show whether it's legal or illegal. I reckon we got a really good case, otherwise we wouldn't have put it on the car.
Okay, Dick Johnson, great drive early in the race, but he's not going to win today here at Lakeside in front of his home crowd. Mike.
Yes, Cole. Bit of a pity, really, to see Dick out, but look at this race, the scrap continuing between second place Glenn Seaton, the man right behind him, of course, is Tony Longhurst, and Grice in there just to make life unbearable for the pair of them, particularly if he can get a straight line shot at them. Try and pull back that lap and go chasing after the leaders. Here's Grice. Sitting right in behind Longhurst. Through the carousel. Coming back down towards the Dunlop Bridge. Seaton has handled the situation here beautifully. He's been under a lot of pressure for maybe 20 or so laps.
Has come on a treat, hasn't he, Mike, in the last 12 months. When he first got into the big league, a few of his the more experienced drivers were prepared to take exception to some of his aggressive driving, but I think he settled down and really matured as a race driver.
He certainly has done that.
A chip off the old block.
His dad should be very proud of him. As he said earlier in our Park Royal Pole Sitters recap, that when his dad was winning Bathurst, young Glenn was in a bassinet at Mount Panorama. Here's a fella.
I'm sorry, Mike. Just had confirmation through that Alan Grice's problem was indeed tyres, and he's gone in and gone for a softer set of Yokohama cross plies. And that's got the Commodore back on the boil once more.
This might work in Glenn's favour. Having Alan Grice in your rear-view mirror will probably disturb Tony Longhurst a touch, and that could allow Glenn just to creep away.
They head up to Motorcraft Hill again. Richards, meantime, opening the gap over Glenn Seaton. So 1-3 at the moment for Team JPS BMW. teammate Greg Hansford is in the pits. He's had problems during the course of the race. Winds up in the pits, parked next to Dick. And he was coming on strong. He was involved, of course, in that scrap earlier. Dick moves along to find out what was going wrong with his car. In the meantime, the battle for 4th and 5th continues.
Larry Perkins is some 17 seconds down on Tony Longhurst in this 4th position. Behind him, Peter Brock, as you can well see. Originally behind these two drivers we had Hansford. He pulled in during the break. So a race within a race for the minor placings. And around about 4 seconds covers the top 3 drivers. That's Jim, Glenn Seaton and Tony Longhurst.
Out of the carousel. It's been quite a week for Peter Brock, as we've detailed this week. 42 years of age is our Peter from Melbourne, company director. First in the 74, 78 and 80 Australian Touring Car title. 8 times winner of the James Hardie 1000, 9 times Castrol 500 victor. And 6th in the 87 Australian Touring Car Championship with 18 points. Stats courtesy of Nissan know how. And Peter Brock knows how this week. The number 6 car was originally assigned for Gary Scott of Queensland. But Pete found himself without 05, his regular ride, on Thursday when Scotty was bedding in some brakes and a motor. And gave it the Errol Flynn touch, straight off the racetrack and into the wall, demolished the car. And Scotty is a spectator today. Crocky takes over the number 6 car. Not doing too bad at all, running 5th on the road at the moment.
Brock's gone for a very hard suspension setup, realising that this was a 1-hour race. He didn't quite know how to prepare for it. And also experimenting with some new Bridgestone tyres this weekend, and they've gone for a completely new case construction. And Larry Perkins indeed using a new radial Dunlop tyre called a D14, an experimental tyre. The two of them at the moment absolutely nose to tail. That tells you how much the rivalry is between the tyre companies at the moment, how even they are, producing some great racing. Former chief engineer and team leader when they were together, now running their own operations. And their fortunes have brought them back onto the track nose to tail 2 years after they first broke up here at Lakeside in 1985.
Perkins at the wheel of the NZ Fluid Connectors Commodore. Fastest hose doctor at Lakeside today is Larry Perkins. And Rocky and he have been having a great duel for probably now 10 to 12 laps.
Larry's got 27 points on the board in the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship. Quite a fair way down on Jim Richards with 41. Rocky's further down behind him in 6th placing with 18 points. So this is a crucial battle for Brock to try and get some valuable points in the 9-round series. They're coming up behind Denny Holm, and Denny was the driver that partnered Larry Perkins to a win in the Pukekarre 500-kilometre race in January this year in New Zealand.
They come down the roller coaster, just ahead of them, of course. This marvellous dice between Glenn Seaton, Tony Longhurst and Alan Grice. And they're still on the boil. Jimmy Richards continues to lead the Australian Touring Car Championship round for the Shell Ultra Series. This is the race for second. Glenn Seaton, Tony Longhurst, and of course behind them Alan Grice, but he's down a lap.
One of the things that the Nissan team are experimenting with this weekend, and indeed they've embarked on a new campaign involving some new technology, is a new engine management system and a total diagnostic computer and keyboard. There's Frank Gardner, a worried man, wondering the fortunes of his two drivers. Alan Grice pulls out to pass Tony Longhurst. Pretty hard to do that with his flying BMW, but it's becoming a great three-way battle. Look at Tony up on the outside. Glenn covers his tracks. He knows how to make it difficult for Tony. Certainly not doing anything wrong. Playing within the spirit of the rules. This new engine management system on the Nissan is developed by a company called Electromotive in the United States, and it's Brett Gibson's idea to institute this new type of system on the car early in the season, so that when these cars go from the 100 octane avgas that they currently use down to 90 octane supergrade pump fuel after September, they'll be well and truly ready for it. It brings the power on a little smoother, gives an overall better fuel-air mixture ratio into the engine. They can therefore turn the boost up at any given point in the rev range. And although the car doesn't have more horsepower than it currently churns out, it uses what horsepower it's got just a little better.
Here comes Gracie down the outside. Oh, that does it too. Now that will do anything but make Tony Longhurst happy. And that really does put a bit more pressure on Glenn Seaton, because Gracie is down a lap. And he's trying to get that back, get back on the same lap as the leaders. But at this stage, his choice of tyre certainly paying off for him. The only problem being that he had to take a pit stop to change them. Started off on a hard compound. Just ahead of them, of course, is Colin Bond in the Caltex Team Alfa Romeo, the Turbo 75.
They've had a lot of work done on this car, and by gee, it's improved its performance this weekend with an additional 50 or 60 brake horsepower, thanks to Joe Beninka in Melbourne, one of the Alfa specialists down there. We've seen his brother Dominic perform very well at sports sedan racing. Alan Grice coming out from behind Glenn Seaton, trying to unwind the lap. Great shot from Seventh Race Cam. Unusual to see Glenn having a dab on the brakes through the kink, and he runs very wide, almost gets this out in the dirt. Up behind Bondi. That's the sort of pressure that race drivers come on under. They have to consider the guy in front, the guy alongside, and the guy behind. A busy young man, 21-year-old Glenn Seaton. A bigger intercooler on the Alpha now, and far more than first on the car in the first 2 rounds. And he's holding these drivers at the moment, and Gracie is really starting to serve. This is a part where Grice has a lot of trouble getting some 420 horsepower to the ground. Motorcraft Hill, the run down, it's not too bad, although the car gets very skatey at the bottom of this run. It's a real roller coaster. And we'll see whether or not Glenn's on the brakes again as he goes through the left-hander down the bottom. Perhaps he just was a little uncomfortable with his turn in as they cross the line this time. It'll be 10 laps to go. The V8 horsepower of the Commodore just working very nicely for Alan Grice as they go through the kink. Glenn has a look at the passenger side of the Bob Jane T-Mart's entry, and Grice manages to unwind himself from at least Glenn Seaton, but he's still got a job to do on Jim Richards.
They exit the turn now. There's our shot out the back of the Commodore. That pass has made no difference to the race lead, of course. It has taken a little of the pressure off Glenn Seaton. He has slowed just a whisker, and you'll notice Tony Longhurst will be very close to him by the time they reach the top of the hill. So Gracie, after that pit stop, has come back and looked very competitive indeed in the Bob Jane T-Mart's VL, having its first run here today at Lakeside.
What will be interesting is to just check the gap between first and second and get some idea as to whether Glenn is going back. We'll do that shortly. Colin Bond must be a much happier man now with the improved performance of the Alpha 75, and Richard Hay, our European correspondent, warned us at the start of the season that with the car being tipped in Europe was the real worry for this season. It's now 8.19 seconds between leader Jim Richards and second placed Glenn Seaton, so if anything, Jim is pulling away. There's Bondi. James Hardy winner, rally champion, touring car champion. Mr. Everything in Australian motorsport, been around a long, long time. And a much happier Colin Bond this morning.
leading the fleet at the moment is Jimmy Richards in the JPS BMW, the new M3. The car, of course, that dominated the opening round of the World Touring Car Championship 3 weeks ago at Monza, Italy. What a formation, 6 of them across the line, and 6 then disqualified, which gave the win, of course, to Alan Moffat and John Harvey. But Frank Gardner has persevered with his M3s, and of course the 2 team drivers, Richards and Longhurst, and will be rewarded, it would seem, here this afternoon at Lakeside. As Jim powers onto the start-finishing straight yet again. With about 5 laps remaining, I would think the happiest man at Lakeside would surely be Frank Gardner. Colin Young?
Well, Frank, you should be happy. Jim's leading the race, but Tony's got some problems.
Tony hit a curb nice and early on, and he's had a bit of a wheel alignment problem, so he's a bit of a tyre worry at the moment. But if his tyres hold out, he's still in good shape.
Can he get past Seaton for second, do you think?
If Seaton has his way, no.
Well, Frank, a lot of controversy a couple of weeks ago in Italy with the BMW, but a fine performance here today.
Well, the scrutineers are sat on us for a few days, so if there's whatever happened in Italy, goodness only knows, but we're not involved in it, so we just had here to have a motor race.
What about, you had some comments earlier on about the increased performance of Dick Johnson's Ford Sierras.
Well, it was pretty impressive. Rumours have it that there's a little bit of a scrutineering problem with it. The scrutineers are going to look at the turbo on it, whether or not, you know, there's anything illegal. Only time will tell.
Okay, Frank Gardner, team manager for BMW, and he's in charge of the race-winning car, Jim Richards. Mike.
Thank you, Cole. An in-depth interview with Frank Gardner. And Frank, of course, patting his drivers on the back and not wanting to be drawn into anything. That's Frank. And there's Jim coming up on Denny Hulme, not having the best of days in the John Andrew Motorsport Ford Sierra, a car that has been campaigned by Neville Crichton in a couple of races this year. They're also hopeful of achieving the same development results as Dick Johnson for their car over the next couple of races.
Performances for this little car so far in the championship haven't been too bad. Jim Richards, a 5th from round 1 after getting pole on the Saturday, 2nd down at Symonds Plains, and looks like he might climb into the winners' rostrum today's round. Let's have a look at the actual gap between Richards and the battle for 2nd place between Seaton and Longhurst. Richards in the 4th round, and a country mile back to 2nd and 3rd. There they are, and Tony Longhurst working very, very hard at trying to make it a JPS BMW 1-2.
Yes, you have to cast your mind back to the spot where Jim was able to nobble his way past Glenn Seaton on the approach to Hungary Corner. Tony just wasn't close enough to be able to follow him through. And because of that, he's had to battle with Glenn Seaton for the probably 3/4 of the race. They come out of the FM 104 sweeper. And quite clearly you can see the gap between 2nd and 3rd. 3 laps remain in round 3 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car title. And I think we've seen enough today to suggest that when Dick Johnson cures his little problems with the Ford Sierra Cosworth, no one particular car or team has a laydown was there on the touring car title races for the rest of the season. Across the line, 2 laps remain. There's our race leader, Jimmy Richards, car number 3 for Team JPS. Had an absolutely fantastic season back in '85 when he won the Australian Touring Car title. Won 7 of the 10 rounds. Was unbeaten at Sydney's Amaroo Park in the Better Brakes Amscar Series.
Tony Longhurst just starting to drift back now from this dice. So it looks as though it's going to be JPS BMW, Peter Jackson Nissan, and JPS BMW, the order at the end of the 60 laps.
Coming on to the start-finishing straight with 1 lap to go. Jimmy Richards from Victoria streaks down through the sweeper, down towards the right-hander at the carousel. Has driven an impeccable race. Is involved in the scrap with Dick Johnson. and any number of other cars in the opening laps. Was able to get through on the inside of Glenn Seaton. Once in front, he's opened the gap all the time. Beneath the bridge, and now down to Hungry Corner. It's been a long time between Australian touring car rounds for Jim. He picked up a result at the Winton Raceway round last year, basically because the leading Nissan was eliminated from the results because of a technical breach. Coming off Shell Ultra High turn, down the roller coaster. The last turn, this finishing straight, checkered flag at the ready, and Jimmy Richards is going to strike gold here today at Lakeside International Raceway. He takes round 3. Second spot will go to Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline driver Glenn Seaton, who comes through the turn now, and running third all the way to the flag is going to be Tony Longhurst. Probably the best touring car race of the season, round 3 of the Shell Ultra Nationals here today at Lakeside International Raceway. Let's recap the placings for you on our scoreboard. JPS Jim takes it, second spot to Glenn Seaton, and Tony Longhurst third.